Hey, deserving listeners, sister wives, let's watch and see what happens. I'm curious.
I don't necessarily agree with 100% of what she's saying based on everything I'm reading.
I do trust our doctor. I know that she has the best intention for our family. I do think that.
I think our family doctor is giving her perspective, and we're taking it like gospel truth. I absolutely am embracing everything the CDC tells us to do. I wear a mask, I wash my hands, I carry hand sanitizer with me when I go to the grocery.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about those early days. And I've heard people talk about this phase as evidence that the government doesn't know what they're doing. The government and, Fauci and all them, they were following the science, which was very new. And if you know anything about the scientific process, the blazing speed that scientists and epidemiologists and the government actually achieved is really a feat of human ingenuity and hard work and government funding. The fact that we had a vaccine within, in under a year that was being, administered to people in the United States is just astonishing. But in those early days, I think we can all remember that the focus was on contact, that we were being told that we needed to wash our hands a lot. I remember that whole thing. It's like, you want to wash your hands for 10 seconds each or something. And there were all these like YouTube videos about, you got to make sure you count to 10. And then we end up, maybe that does help to some extent, but then we learned that it was it was an airborne, and don't quote me on this, I'm not a biologist, so I'm just going off of a layperson's memory of all this, but and then of course there was the whole mask thing, and it was a theory, it was a hypothesis that masks would help, and then they were saying that, well, it has to be N95, but then there wasn't enough N95 go around, and they're like, well, really any mask would help at least to some extent, and then there's been studies later that contradicted that. But the science is all over the place, and I find that, you have political figures that will use this information as a way to discredit science or to discredit a political figure or something. But I remember, as a scientist myself, and as someone that knows how to read, medical research to some extent anyway, I certainly know how to read research. I very much remember that it takes time, and they were just trying to be as careful as possible. And I don't know, I say all that because I'm just remembering, she's like, hand sanitizer and the washing the hands. And she's talking about masks as well. I don't know. I guess I'm just remembering. Me and Umberto did a whole, was it one episode or a few episodes where we recalled systematically all the things that happened, day by day. And it gave me a chance to kind of comb through everything that happened, and also to match it up with the death count that was happening, because we didn't even necessarily know how many people were dying, because it's hard to gauge that, because it's not like there's a magical way that when someone dies, automatically we have that death registered and we automatically even know how they died. So there's a lot of research that goes into establishing, how many people did actually COVID kill. Anyway, and it was really, I wasn't ready for this when I did those episodes with Umberto, and realizing just how many people were dying in those early months and weeks. Just 100,000 dead already, and then 300,000 dead in the United States alone from COVID. It was just a terrifying time. So I don't know. I need to calm down and not revisit all this trauma. So I'm gonna try to just pay attention to what they're saying.
Store, I'm careful. Like, I'm not going a lot of places. Cody.
Oh, so what they're saying is what I was seeing in an earlier Zoom conversation, and that they don't all agree necessarily, and that Robin and Cody are seemingly more concerned and taking more measures than at least Janelle and Christine. I don't know about Mary though.
He seems to be taking it to a whole different level of isolation. I'm trying to get us together, and nobody seems to be playing ball with me. And I'm just kind of like, come on, guys. So I guess if they want to continue to be apart, and maybe we're apart for 18 months or 2 years, and maybe the family exists or not after that time period.
Right. So this must be a little bit and maybe a month or two into it, because at least I remember in my pocket in the first couple weeks of the pandemic, we all thought it was just going to be a couple weeks at the most. So to hear her talking about a couple years potentially, that was the time frame initially as to how long it would take for a vaccine to come out. Then, so it sounds like it's later on, and it's interesting. What an interesting situation. And we all, or at least we did. Me and Stacy ran into this. That everyone had different approaches, different risk tolerances. Right? For some people, they were acknowledging the science, but they're just like, look, I would rather take the risk of even death to myself than and socialize and see people or see my family or whatever. I'd rather take that risk. And other people were like, I can't take that, not only for myself, but I don't want to put you at risk. I don't want to put your people at risk. So there was a lot of weird negotiation going on there, and depending on the situation, and I'm hearing from them, at least initially, that all of them have viable approaches. The problem with them is that they're all one family that lives in different homes. Like for me and Stacy, we had some friends. Stacy and I tended to be on the more careful side of the spectrum. But so we had a lot of friends and family that were close to us, but a little bit more risk taking. But then we had other friends of ours who were seemingly taking all the risks. And that's up to them. You could argue that it's important to, especially in those early days, to do your part to not spread it. But without getting into that, for me and Stacy anyway, we would just say, well, that's them, and duly noted, and we just won't meet up with them, and we probably weren't going to anyway, because we don't want anyone to die. That was us, and we had that freedom. And were there some hurt feelings at times? Yeah, I think maybe a little bit. I'm not sure. I was just careful just to tell everyone, look, I know I'm a little paranoid, but I'm not a young chicken. Is that a phrase? I'm getting up there myself, and I'd rather not see the end at this point. But it sucked. It really sucked, especially looking back, just the amount of suffering that I was going through because of that. And if I did it again, would I take a little bit more risk? I don't know. It's hard. Back then, we just didn't know. It was just a complete black hole of knowledge. We just had no idea what was going to happen. Anyway, so the difference with this family is that if they all lived in the same house, then they would, what do I say? I would imagine that they would, say that Janelle's older kids were living and they were all living in the same house, that they would either collectively gravitate towards a negotiated middle ground, meaning that Janelle's kids might pull back a little bit, but not completely, and Cody and Robin would, adjust towards them a little bit. I'm guessing that's what's happened, but since they're in different homes, it really complicates things. Plus, there's a lot of people involved. With Stacy and me, it was just the two of us. We just had to agree between the two of us. which we were completely on the same page from the beginning. We didn't. In the initial day-ish, we disagreed. Not in a conflictual way, but Stacy was still working outside. She works as a skin esthetician, skincare person, and she had a client, and it was that sort of, it was before the official lockdown happened, and I was just like, I don't think you should go to work. And from my memory, I don't think she did. But that was the only moment. That was like the one moment where she was doing something, and I was like, I don't know about this. And then from then on, we were always on the same page. Anyway, so for them, it would be and they've all traditionally vied for his affection. And if he's more careful, then he could say, well, I can't go over to your house because you're not being careful, and I don't want to hurt myself. Plus, if I get infected, then I don't want to spread it around the whole family. Plus, there are people that are vulnerable. So yeah, it could really complicate things. And they don't have a lot of communication skills. And they couldn't work things out before. There's a lot of broken relationships during COVID because of this stuff, right? So they were already not doing well.
Everybody just needs to stay home. And then I can see everybody.
If each one of you want to be able to see me, then I can be the only one that you see besides your immediate children. Does that seem understandable?
Yeah. I mean, that would be the safest way. And again, some of you might, even myself, might look back and say, like, well, I don't know if you'd have to be that buttoned up about it. But some of you might say, absolutely, you should. But I would extend that to say, well, if everyone is really rigid about precautions, not only would he move from house to house, but they could all move from house to house, because if they were all following the same, protocols, then they could all hang out, and that would really benefit. And there were people that would do that, actually, and I really was kind of jealous of that. That there were people that pods or whatever that were like, okay, we're all going to be really rigid about these rules, and that will give us the ability to see each other as long as we all follow those protocols. And that means our kids can see each other, and we won't be as isolated the way that everyone else is. We'll be isolated from everyone else, but we'll have all of our friends, and the kids will have their friends. So I would imagine that would be possible. Hopefully, I mean, that would make sense. I mean, they're a family. It's a polygamous family. Isn't that, maybe they'll pull together through this?
I'll get a choice to make and get to choose.
I can't see Maddie and the kids. I can't see Hunter. I really am not willing to do that.
We have to each decide, each household gets to decide, each mom gets to decide, all of you get to decide what you're going to do.
I want everybody to feel like they've got a choice. But what they're literally doing is they're choosing whether or not they're going to have a relationship, a physical relationship with me or not.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, my goodness. So he's already, prior to COVID, he was already exhibiting this lack of tolerance and a really seeming large distance between him and Mary and Christy. I don't know if there's much, I mean, it seems like there's distance between him and Janelle, but there had always been. From the very beginning of me watching the show, there wasn't a lot of evidence of Janelle and Cody having any kind of connection, but I could see them having a connection that's just not PDA-ish, But at the very least, with Mary and Christine, I don't know if I find myself saying Christy sometimes for some reason. Anyway, that they were on the brink of divorcing anyway. So for Cody, in order for him to negotiate through this, since he is the leader and he is the hub, and he is the one that had, and according to the sister wives, aside from Robin, they only got along because they had to. They didn't want to. So they're not going to coordinate. They don't care. Christine doesn't want to see Janelle and her kids. Christine doesn't want to see Mary and her kids. She said that when they lived together, they made it work because they had to. But now that they don't live together, she doesn't want to. She doesn't even want. She hasn't said this, but I don't think she wants any contact with the other sister wives. Or, I mean, she's not opposed to it, but I don't think she would seek it out, And they've talked about how they don't text each other, they don't call each other, now that they're living in, completely separate homes around the Flagstaff area. So it's interesting to think, because if Christine, for example, is going to be a little bit more loose with the precautions for COVID, then Cody, under normal circumstances, 15 years ago, he would say, okay, well, we've got to figure out a way to make this work because we're a family. And I don't know what that would result in, but at the very least, he would show that he cares, and but his attitude now is just like, look, and it's true logically. It's just like, look, everyone has a choice what they're going to do, and I have a choice what I'm going to do. And if you're not going to follow because that's what me and my wife did, was that we said, look, and we didn't have any say in what anyone else did. Of course, we didn't even consider that, but to reduce it to one layer of thinking, it's like Stacy and I would evaluate contact with particular people based on what we were hearing from them as to what they were doing regarding precaution. And to be honest, our trust, because we had friends that were claiming they were doing a lot, and then we would hear something that they would say and we'd be like, what? I can't remember the exact scenario, but we had some friends that, or at least one friend that was adamant that they were following absolutely all of the precautions and were, doing all the things. And then we heard them mention that, like, well, our kids we just picked up our kids from a field trip where they went. It was some kind of thing. We're like, wait, so. And that's them, and everyone was making their own choices, but we were like, that is not in alignment with what you just said. So there were some people where we just couldn't. There was evidence that they literally were lying about their precautions because they just wanted to manipulate us into hanging out with them. Is that a funny thing to say? Or they just thought that the precautions were stupid to begin with because they were in some sort of weird echo chamber. Now, again, looking back from what we know now from enough science and data, were there things that were being recommended and practiced back then that were going too far? Maybe, but we just didn't know. I mean, in that time, I promised myself I wouldn't go down this road again, but I'm doing it. That I really didn't want to limit my life. I hate limiting my life. I wanted to live and go to a restaurant and hang out with friends and see my family. I mean, that was a big one. I wanted to see my students. I wanted to see my clients. I hate Zoom. I didn't like it then, and I fucking hate it now. I refuse. I haven't used Zoom for anything. I haven't used video conferencing for anything unless I absolutely have to. In a long time. So anyway, I remember I was really looking for any excuse to relent on the precautions, but looking at all the data and actually following the epidemiology and the mutations and the deaths and the risks and the fact that we didn't know how many people, because of testing, we couldn't even get tests. We could. I remember months. And so we actually didn't know how many people were asymptomatic. We knew a number of people were, percentage-wise, but we didn't know to what degree. It seemed like a pretty high percentage. So even if you just limited yourself to people that reported that they didn't have any symptoms, they weren't sick, and they weren't around anyone that was sick, even if everyone was on the up and up with that, it was not a guarantee that the people didn't have it and that you would get it and spread it. Maybe you were and you give it to, if I remember just being terrified about my parents because, they're up there in age. Now they're in their early 80s, but in that time they were late 90s. And, it just seemed inevitable that a number of people close to me were going to die from it because it just seemed that way for a good amount of time. And I because of all the measures that everyone took, not only in my friends and circle, family, But also in Seattle, there was a lot of compliance and a lot of precautions, a lot of unity compared to other areas, and maybe privilege because there's a lot of tech people who can work from home, that kind of thing. And although we had initial cases show up in Seattle because of international travel to China, that is, probably more so, done from the West Coast, that kind of thing. We actually in Seattle and Washington State had per capita one of the lowest death rates compared to other areas, particularly of the United States. Anyway, so and I take a lot of pride in that. That was a community effort, a public health effort. Anyway, so there's a chance that for Cody, he's thinking, well, there was nothing there between me and Christine anyway. So why? I don't care. I don't. And Christine, she might be like, okay, you have Cody. This is how you're going to do it. Fine. I don't want to do that, and I'll be damned if I adjust for your sake because I don't even want to be married to you anymore. This is good riddance. This is a way. Maybe it's even a way for them to drive the other person away from them. Christine and Cody themselves could be purposely being rigid from their side of things because, I hadn't thought about this because they're hemmed in by their religion, and this would excuse them, right? This would give them an excuse to effectively separate and say, I didn't want to see you anyway. I mean, Christine has basically said that. She's like, when he comes over, it's disruptive. I don't like it. And I think that's been going on, for a long time. And with Cody and Mary, that relationship isn't going well. So I guess ironically, Mary might be the easiest one to visit because she lives by herself. But anyway, wow, this could be interesting. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So we often casually talk about a support system, but I really want you to stop and think about your support system. A quick way to assess your support system is to explore the following. Let's say that you're suffering from something significant. Do you have at least 3 people that you can talk with about it? 3 people that will really take the time to listen. 3 people that are available today, not next week. Well, if not, therapy can help with this by not only providing that support, but also by helping you to build that support system. Maybe you have trouble trusting other people and a therapist can help with that. Well, one place you can find a therapist is at BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. They have over 30,000 therapists with a wide range of styles. So, build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
For their lack of observation of the coronavirus protocols.
You make your choice. My choice is going to be whatever I think is going to make it so I don't live with a life of regret for some screw up in a 3-month time period versus the 30 years of the rest of our lives.
If Janelle.
Okay, so we're hearing a 3-month period. There was also a little bit earlier where I think Janelle was saying that she can't live like this for the whole summer. So I think they're just beginning the summer of 2020. And yeah, I remember that too. I remember thinking, look, we just have to hold on for a little bit longer, and then we'll get out of the woods. And I don't want to make a mistake and kill myself, and then this whole idea about even if you live through it, it could ravage your organs and your brain, and so there was just a lot of worry. And so I remember thinking like, just hold on a little bit longer. We're almost out of the woods, and you don't want to push things and then regret the rest of your life. So he's having some. I haven't been showing these clips, I don't think, but he seems to be resentful. In the one-on-one interviews, like right now, where we're seeing this one-on-one interview with Christine, I always suspect that they do these interviews after the season has been filmed and edited, because then they know what to ask questions. So it's always interesting to think about that months later, they would still, it's sort of like a time travel in terms of the timeline of the show. The one-on-one interview reveals what they're thinking later on. Sometimes they're coached to kind of go back into that emotional space, even though they're no longer there. But anyway, Cody has been essentially saying, look, it's my way or the highway, and you can do what you want to do, and I don't care. And so it could either be just frustration with the situation, or Cody just is using it as an excuse to distance, or he just doesn't care enough about them, or none of them care about each other. That's probably a better way to put it. Christine doesn't seem to care about Cody. Cody doesn't care about her. Mary doesn't. We haven't heard from Mary yet. Janelle, I think there's evidence that Janelle still cares about her marriage with Cody, because she seems to be trying to the only one really trying to make things work. Robin is mostly staying out of it in the edit, but that's because it seems as though Cody and Robin are on the same, they coincide with the same precautions.
Decision. I'm going to make my own decision. I would rather see us all work together, make a decision together, rather than him or anybody just being like, do your thing, I'll do my thing, whatever, we'll just all do our own thing.
What if there's some sort of middle ground? I mean, the weather's going to be so beautiful. What if the 5 of us at least drove our cars somewhere and
To the property? Should we go have a picnic? 5 people?
So this is good. And maybe this is a good shift where they're not all looking to Cody to be that glue, and other people are stepping forward to try to work things out, to figure out a way to be together. But it's not a good sign that Cody doesn't care. I think we definitely, and I'm pretty confident that if COVID had happened, particularly in the first few seasons, I think Cody would have been working really hard to get everyone on the same page and would put a lot of effort in terms of the edit. This is pretty consistent with a number of episodes so far, where Cody just is like, look, you have a choice. Just do what you want. I don't care, which could be easily received by those who don't align with him in terms of his, precaution level, as a message of he doesn't care. He doesn't want to be with you. Like for me and my wife, when we had, some distance people who were more lax about the rules, we were just like, well, I guess we're just not going to see them until we're all vaccinated. I don't know. But with people that meant more to us, we put more effort, and typically that meant we had to take more risks. We had to relinquish that, and we would, because there were people that we really needed to see, wanted to see, and be with. So, it's just a matter of priority, and it just kind of looks like he just doesn't, which makes sense. And I think if Christine was in charge, I think it would be a similar thing, because I don't think Christine cares, particularly Christine. I don't know if I showed it, but Mary seems to be still on the, she's still in the mindset of like, well, let's try to work it out. So Christine and Cody seem to be the least interested in that.
Behavior. We haven't solved this problem. And there's some underlying lack of trust within the family. Those who don't believe that coronavirus can cause harm are not trusting those who are following sort of the draconian recommendations of the government.
Interesting. Well, both sides, if you will. There seem to be two factions. The faction that is saying, let's be very careful, and then another that is saying, well, let's be careful, but not like as careful. And both are saying they're following the government recommendations. I guess it's just a different version of the government recommendation. I don't know. Or different governments, like state government versus federal government. I don't know. But wait, so what did he say? I remember. He said trust. So his narrative at this point anyway, and who knows, could I wonder if some people might think this is just some elaborate lie so that he could finally just be with Robin all the time, even though right now he's at Janelle's house. So there's that. And I suppose, could be, we can add that to the hypothesis. It wouldn't be unheard of, even if it was a subconscious urge, motivation, who knows. But he's basically saying indirectly that he is trying to have all the necessary precautions. But I don't know, as I say that out loud, well, anyway, I'll finish that thought, that he wants the whole family to follow a certain level of precaution, and he believes he's coming from the right place, the safe place, or the right way of thinking about it. And for example, Christine is like, I don't think we have to go that far. And he's narrativizing it in the edit anyway as Christine doesn't trust him and is rejecting him maybe just because of him. And that's one way of looking at it. It doesn't look that way to me. It just looks like all the adults are looking at all the science and looking at all the news reports, all the same stuff, and are just drawing different conclusions. And that's what we all do. As an analogy, and I remember thinking this at the time, that every time you get in your car and drive somewhere, you're taking a risk of killing yourself or other people, including your passengers, including your kids if they're in the car with you, or at least seriously maiming, seriously harming yourself physically. It's a risk. We all understand that, right? That every time, and car wrecks, accidents are frequent, and especially at certain times of the night, with drunk drivers and whatnot. And we all understand that. And if we were to be completely careful and were thinking about extending life or not risking anybody, including the people we're driving, then we would never drive anywhere, right? But at a certain point, you're like, well, I need to take that risk because of X, Y, and Z, right? Well, the same was with this. Everyone had to make that calculation of, okay, if I was to be completely safe about the virus, I would never leave my house and I would never come into contact with another human being until this is all over. But I don't want my kids to be wallowing in isolation and have trauma of not being able to see their grandparents or a couple friends, or myself. Like, if I go through this and through the COVID pandemic, if I go through those early months or that first year and follow all the protocols, or at least the most strict protocols, okay, fine, I lived through it, but who am I at the end of all that? Where am I? What's going on? And there's a lot of things we could talk about in terms of privilege. There are tons of people that weren't even allowed to have that question because of their employment forcing them to do one thing or another. Anyway, so there's that. And also, when you think about echo chambers, particularly as time was going on, but we all ran into that. There's all sorts of questions that we ask ourselves, like eating certain kinds of foods, right? Or having certain kind of lifestyles. It's always a matter of risk. It's like, well, yeah, having a donut probably isn't the best thing for my health, but if I have to eat bland things for the rest of my life for the possibility statistically of living longer, I don't think I want to live that life. I'd rather shave a few years off my life and, have an apple fritter now and then or something. It's I don't know if everyone thinks that way, but it is one way to think, and it was that way to think for them. And so for him, he is saying that, but in an ideal family-oriented way, they would force themselves to say, look, we are a family. And even if that means that, if I've been saying this, but if this was 15 years ago or 10 years ago, I think he would say, the most important thing is the family. And I'll do my best to try to convince everyone to follow my protocol for everyone's sake, because I'm trying to keep everyone alive and myself. But if doing that, establishing my level of carefulness is going to drive us apart as a family, I won't let that happen. I will figure out another way. I'll sit down and just beg people, please, let's work, because he's not doing that. He's not even trying. He's like, here you go, make a choice. And I don't know if I show this clip, but another factor is that he is stating essentially that he's done trying to get everyone to coordinate. He put a lot of effort into getting everyone to coordinate for many years, and I think he's just tired of it. Maybe because of rejection. I could see like prior, particularly, if we look at Mary's catfishing situation, that for him, he was willing to put a lot of effort into smoothing things over and to coordinating and to throwing himself under the bus, which he would do occasionally, or even to just put his foot down, like, no, this is, whatever he was doing to coordinate everything, making everyone feel loved and cared about. And then when the thing with Mary happened, the next moment that comes up where he's like, okay, here's now the time when I put all this effort into coordinating everything, he could have ran up against this wall, just like, but they don't even want to be, one of them doesn't even want to be with me. I mean, look at these receipts. Why would I put all that, we could see that happening. And then it just sort of cascades from there. And then that is felt by the sister wives, particularly Mary and Christine, maybe particularly Christine. And that causes them to say, why would I put effort into loving this man who doesn't even seem to care, and it just gets worse and worse. It kind of looks that way to me. And the pandemic could really drive a nail into the coffin. All right. I want to remind everyone that the Business of Psychology in Seattle, which is a corporation, by the way, we are not fully, I don't think, I haven't done a full analysis, but I think we're carbon neutral, which is a big deal to me as a person, but also as a business. We work from home, all of us, right? Mainly my house that I'm in right now with my wife and my dogs. And I installed, not me personally, but I had a company install a lot of solar panels. And, Seattle doesn't get a lot of sun, but enough. And the technology is efficient enough now that we can we can have all of our electrons, all of our power through the sun, net over the year, because we get a lot more sunlight in the summer, right? The computers and the Wi-Fi and the internet and these lights and the camera and the heating of this room or the AC of the room, what did I mention, the computer? All those things, one could say are completely powered by the sun, which is, really great. I'm pretty conscientious about that, being carbon neutral, because I'm worried, and I'm really worried. Things aren't going well, So anyway, I don't know if that matters to you. It matters to me. And when I learn about a business that is doing, like there's a local fast food restaurant in Seattle called Taco Time. And apparently, at least in terms of their marketing materials, they say that all of their cups and napkins and bags and packaging and straws, all of it is biodegradable, which I'm guessing costs more to the business, right? And makes them raise their prices a bit, which I am absolutely willing to pay because of the, just all the plastics and all this. And I don't know the viability of the claim. I haven't really looked into it, but I trust the business, so hopefully it's on the up and up. Anyway, so I tend to choose those kinds of businesses to work with, and I would imagine you might be interested in that. So, it's a green company, one could say. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.